So thank you for sticking around. Before we know it, we'll have church all day long, right? Some congregations do. So this is the forum to discuss proposed changes to OUUC's covenant and the addition of a behavioral covenant. So as we do when we gather, we'll light a chalice, and these words are from Adam's slate. We gather as one community, a community united by common ideals, love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Just take a moment to look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us has our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We will light our chalice today, honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives in every one of us. So we've got a plan for today, and I just want to outline that for you and let you know what we're thinking. I want to do a little bit of a description of what we've done and what we're doing and why, and then share what's proposed for changes to the covenant. And then most of our time will be spent in small groups, both here and online. We'll have a breakout room or two as needed. For discussion, and I have some reflection questions for you, of course. And then we'll have questions and next steps at the end. So before we do that, I want to introduce the Healthy Congregations team. I mentioned them in the service today, and I want you to meet them again with deep gratitude to these folks for gathering and their support. Martha Nikoloff, Don Melnick, Alice Curtis, Dan Donahue, Barbara Okeson, and Megan Johnston. Megan is a consultant for the Healthy Congregations team. And of course, that team is supported by the OUUC Board of Trustees and I. So thank you so much for your service to the congregation. So what exactly are we talking about? What are we proposing regarding the OUUC covenant? So we're keeping the current OUUC covenant. That's a covenant that's been around for a while. I understand it was created in response to some conflict that happened in the congregation, and there's a lot good in it, so we're not going to replace it. We're adding to it. We're going to modify a couple things in the current covenant to remove some ableist language and to remove staff, and we're proposing to add a behavioral covenant. So I want to talk about the staff piece, and I'll do that in just a minute. So why? So why are we needing to make some changes? Well, as I said this morning, it's something that we revisit regularly. The UUA is revisiting the covenant. We're revisiting our covenant because we change and grow. So the current covenant has some specific behaviors in it, but it's very general and it's very abstract. And so the behavioral covenant is intended to make very clear what we expect of each other when we're in agreement and when we're in conflict. The current covenant uses "we will" language, so we will do this thing, which can suggest unity. It can also diffuse responsibility. So the proposed behavioral covenant intentionally uses "I will" language. And I know some folks have a hard time with that. The intention of that is it makes clear that we each have some individual responsibility that we bring to our community, responsibility for our own behavior and the promises that we make to each other. And then the last thing is about the staff and the ministers. The current covenant includes staff and minister, and the proposed behavioral covenant was also to include the staff and ministers. And the Board of Trustees and I had a conversation about this, and the board took a vote The challenge with that is that there are some specific things in the behavioral covenant that don't apply to staff, like an expectation of pledging, volunteering, sharing time and resources. It's our job to do that. And we serve, we serve out of love and all those things. And so it really was a conversation about, is it appropriate for the staff to be included in a congregational covenant? And the board's decision was no. And I want to say that part of that discussion was talking about and looking at all of the ways that staff are held accountable. And there's a bunch of them. Most of us are involved in professional organizations. I'm a member of the UU Ministers Association. We have a covenant and ethical guidelines. So do the musicians, so do the administrators, so do the religious educators. We have an employee handbook for OUUC that has lots of expectations of staff. And so by removing staff from the covenant, don't think that there are not expectations and accountability for ministers and staff. They exist. They just exist outside of the congregational covenant, and the expectation is that we will be in right relationship with each other as well as with the congregation. So if you have questions about that, we can certainly talk about that some more. So there's a bunch of things that we've done about this so far, and I want to just review those quickly. So a year ago, October, we had a service that kicked off our re-exploration of covenant, led by Reverend Carroll and Reverend Summer Albayati. Then, as a result of that service and workshop, a writing team went to work and created a behavioral covenant based on the comments, using some examples from other congregations. And I want to lift up a thank you to Martha Nikoloff, Janae Wolfram, Rich Coleman, and Helen Henry, who have been an amazing writing team and have been at this for more than a year. Thank you, thank you, thank you all for that good work. So then, after the writing team did some drafting, we took a first draft to the Board of Trustees, and they had some comments. And then we brought the first draft to the congregation in March for a congregational forum. There was a lively and engaged discussion. Lots of wordsmithing happened that day. So then the writing team went back and revisited based on the feedback. And then, during that time, I asked some individuals if they would form a healthy congregations team. It's been something that's been wanted and needed here for quite some time. And miraculously, the 6 individuals you met earlier said yes. It was amazing and wonderful. And so we formed that team. And then we brought the next draft to the congregation with the Healthy Congregations team on May 7th. Another discussion about covenant, some more wordsmithing. And so the writing team once again went to work and created another draft that went to the board and to me this fall, and the Healthy Congregations team. And so today is the 3rd forum that we've had for discussion about this covenant and proposed changes. So for right now then, I want to go into our small groups for some discussion. And there's a few resources that are available. For the online folks, we're going to put some links in the chat to the current covenant, the non-covenantal behavior policy, the employee handbook, and the proposed changes to the covenant. And I want to say just a word about the non-covenantal behavior policy. This is a policy that the board created several years ago about what do we do when there's conflict between members or conflict in the congregation. And so it laid out a process. That was before we had a Healthy Congregations team. And so that non-covenantal behavior policy is currently under review by Martha Nikoloff and Rich Coleman from the board. And the board will be looking at a revision to that policy as well. So what you'll have is the current policy as it exists, but it gives you an idea of what the board's thinking is about how we directly and kindly handle when conflict arises. So up here on the stands, I have a copy of the proposed changes and some copies of the non-covenantal behavior policy. There's about 15 of them, so you might have to share, or we can make some more if needed. And then once you're in your groups, I have some copies of the reflection questions for you to talk about today. And I would invite you in your reflection circles to pay attention to the big questions. I am asking you to consider things like, what is the purpose of a covenant? Have you had experience, being in covenant? Have you experienced not living up to the covenant? What should happen when we don't live up to our covenant, and what's your role in the congregational covenant? Those are big questions. And you're not going to have time to talk about all of them, but you'll have time to talk about some of them. My intention is that we not spend a lot of time on wordsmithing again. We've done a lot of that. Now, there might be words or phrases that you have questions about or that you're concerned about. And if you are, please be in touch with me. You can email me suggestions, or you can email me questions, or you can talk with members of the Healthy Congregations team. We're happy to answer that. We can wordsmith forever, and UUs are known for wordsmithing forever. The covenant is a map, right? It's the map, it's our aspiration, it's really how we live into it that is most important. So what I'm thinking is we'll probably have, maybe 4 or 5 groups here on site. Let's look for maybe 5 or 6 people per group so that everybody has a chance to participate. And what I would invite you to pay attention to, and what I'll ask when we come back together again, is what insights did you have? Did you have an aha moment? Was there something where you went, oh, I hadn't thought about that, or oh, that was new to me, or oh, my thinking changed? I shared this morning about in and out of covenant and my thinking changing. Was there something that happened like that for you today, or for the members of your group? And that's what we'll share when we come back together. We'll have time for questions, and I'll talk about the next steps then. So is that making sense? Okay, so we can form groups in here. There's room up in the choir chairs. You could go out into the commons if needed. It might be noisy out there still. So some groups here on site and some groups online, and we'll have some discussion. I would say let's come back together in about half an hour at 12:15. Sound good? Thank you all.
Mary?
Yes?
Might I suggest that we do a count-off system?
Oh, Mary's suggesting a count-off system. Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Will you start with one?
Do you want the members of the team to go in separate?
Oh, yeah, let's do that. So, and probably you won't be, and if you are, yeah, we'll have a member of Healthy Congregations. So let's do 5. So Megan, if you want to start with 1.
1,
Don?
4, 5. 1,
2,
4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Barbara's 5?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. All right. So should we do 1's here, 2's back there, 3's back there, 4's back there, and 5's up here? If you would wrap up your conversations and come back together. So I invite you to finish your thought and then come back together as a big group. So our online folks are back with us? Thank you. So I want to thank you all. It warms this minister's heart to see groups of people sitting together, listening to each other deeply and sharing on things that are really important. This is the purpose of church. So it's really magical and wonderful to be a part of that. So thank you so much for your deep engagement. So I'm curious what insights you might have had in your discussion, personal or group. And we'll pass the mic around, or I'll bring the mic around so that everybody can hear each other, both here and online. So for folks online, if you have something you'd like to share, I invite you to raise your hand physically or virtually. And for anyone in the room here who would like to share, just raise your hand.
I hope that you guys had as good a time as we had in our group. We had a wonderful discussion. What a subject. And it turns out that discussing about disagreements is so agreeable to do, and it's so important and profound that I think we can all grow from it and help each other and maybe grow here and bring that growth out into the community as we all learn and improve our skills and knowledge here.
One aha that we had at the end was that this covenant applies to those of us who share a home with someone in this congregation. So how does that impact what we talk about at home? You know, I've had the experience where it's like, well, it's not really gossip, but did you know, because I share a home with someone who goes to this church. And that's out of covenant. So it's just something to think about.
Well, I came to the realization quite quickly in our group that I'm very naive. And I need to think more widely about this congregation.
Isn't that an invitation?
Tell me you're all.
In our group, it sounds like there's still quite a bit of skepticism in some parts as far as we can't expect that now that we've written this wonderful behavioral covenant that all of a sudden everybody will talk directly to each other and express their feelings and resolve all the hidden old conflicts, that it's going to be a process.
For sure, and thank you for saying that out loud. The covenant isn't the thing. The covenant is the tool, right? We still have to do the thing. So from the chat. I heard in my breakout room that most of what appears in the proposed behavioral covenant is just being a good person. I think that is accurate, but that does not make having a covenant less important. Thank you, Harthorn, for that. So there were some, I'm going to get Gail and then come back forward. I did see you. And there was somebody else over here too, wasn't there?
I stepped out of the room for just a second, but one of the things we talked about and how we actually make that happen is that because many of us have been in this congregation for a long time, we're used to having conversations with each other in small groups, and we talk to each other about each other. So we decided that one of the things about being covenantal is to agree to not triangulate, and that we really have to say, okay, if you're upset, we use the example of Josie is upset about Fritz. I can't say, oh, tell me more. You have to say, well, that's too bad. Please talk to Fritz. Or if do you need help talking to Fritz, don't talk to me about it. Especially not Fritz. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Keto. You probably don't know me. And I use they, them pronouns. I like to introduce myself. I liked our discussion about brave space, which I think a lot of people might not know about, so I'll give my understanding of it. So a brave space comes out of the safe space movement, a safe space meaning that I can come here and we all agree to certain things and I'll never get hurt again from anything, which is not realistic. So Brave Space grew out of that. It's an idea that I can come and be brave and talk about things from my perspective, and I can talk and learn from others. I can have a vulnerability, but it also, on the flip side, a brave space means I can reach out to someone who has hurt me and say, I would like to speak to you about that. I feel brave enough to be vulnerable, and can you be vulnerable with me as well? So I really like that concept, and I think that covenants are a tool that helps create that brave space.
So from online, we have from Nate Stewart, the important thing about having a written covenant is to set a framework for relating to each other and allow for support and accountability. Yeah. It's not by accident that I preached about accountability last month and conflict this month.
So I'm not going to say this as eloquently as some other people in our group would have. We spent a lot of time talking about what the concept of support means. And if you disagree with the decision that you are supposed to support, I felt as if what we were saying is you still have the obligation to either educate yourself and learn about it where you're still kind of itching about it, where you still disagree. And also sometimes if you have an area where you actually know more than the people who made the decision, sometimes support also means saying, I think this is still going wrong, maybe we should correct it. Because in the long run, that's how all of us do better. And that can be very frightening. And also it's up to everybody to kind of pay attention and monitor themselves about if they're wanting it because they want their way, or if they're wanting it because they really think it's going to work better for the congregation. And so I think the concept of support is tough because we, I think, decided it's not just support without thinking after that. It's support but continuing to evolve and think about it as it goes along. And that's really a high calling, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's really a rich and deep conversation about what does that mean, and just recognizing there's a difference between I don't like it and it's unjust, right? Those are two very different things, and the discernment is, so is this I just don't like it, or is this unjust? Oh, thank you, Megan. Pardon me.
In addition to the brave space, our group also discussed having the tools and skills to actually live into the covenant well, that it's really nice if it's on paper and we agree to it, and what does that actually mean? Do we feel comfortable actually calling in and being vulnerable and having those conversations with somebody who we may feel harmed us? And so that's something that the Healthy Congregations team is talking about. How do we support skill building in our congregation? And then it also came up that the skills we build here can help us in the rest of our lives as well, outside the church.
I thought the group that I participated in sort of, over the throes of the period we talked, began to accept that we each have a role in dealing with conflict. And I wanted to add the book that you spoke of during your sermon about the UU minister. It happened I took that book on a 3-week cruise and learned a lot that conflict is really something that we should expect and respect and deal with, not try to avoid or sweep under the rug, and how we do that.
I had a sweet conversation with someone who was leaving after the service, and he said, I can summarize your sermon for you. Covenant is essential, conflict is inevitable. He said, I could have just said that and been done with it. So it's so nice when it's heard, when the message gets heard. It's just lovely. I'll also say that the Transforming Conflict book I was introduced to about a year and a half ago, and I bought copies for the Healthy Congregations team, and we've read it and are reading it together. And it's really helping to inform our work. It's a good work, and I'm pretty sure you'll hear about it from a sermon again. So, other comments? Anything else online?
I'm sure Curtis was waiting for me to talk. So as you may or may not know, the first church that I joined, I was a member from 8 to 28. My dad's a Southern Baptist pastor, and I was raised conservative Christian and ignorantly racist for a very long time. When I left that church, I went to a small church where I was lovingly confronted about some of the racist beliefs that I may be holding. Part of covenant is being held accountable in love, and I wouldn't be here without that confrontation. And it creates a space for other people to learn the skills to learn, because most racist people are ignorant. It comes from an ignorant place. So how do we lovingly educate them? How do we lovingly lift them up? And when I first started coming here, I kind of told the story. When I first started coming here, I sat next to a nice gentleman during coffees and cookies who did not agree with our queer supporting stance in this congregation. And that was before I became Alex. And so it was an interesting conversation that I just kind of got up and left. Not my problem, not my job. I didn't want to do it, not my emotional work that I wanted to do. And I just kind of I think I told Sarah, and I was like, I'm new here, and I don't know what to do, but this guy seems to have some problems. And I didn't know him, and I've never talked to him again, and he never spoke to me again. In fact, he's not even here anymore. I haven't seen him. So, but anyway, so Sarah can go in love, educate him about why maybe we are a queer affirming congregation and what does that mean and all of that. But covenant allows space for people of other beliefs to be here too. And people were surprised when I said, there's Trumpers in this congregation. There's people who are anti-gay in this congregation. A lot of people don't know that. Because why? Because they are being quiet. They're not feeling welcome. So I mean, there's that balance on how are we welcoming and loving people, and how are we changing their minds. And we can't change their minds if we're othering them too, and treating them disdainfully. And Jesus said, loving your enemy is the hardest commandment to follow.
Thank you, Alex. There was a lot in there. No. Never apologize for a lot. That's wonderful. And I'll just say just one thing to lift up from that. So Alex was in a conversation with someone from a place of oppression and minority status, right? And so asking someone who is already in a more powerless position to educate someone who is more powerful is asking a lot. And so Alex, in that situation, chose to intentionally triangle someone because Alex wanted some help, right? Which is absolutely the right and appropriate thing to do. So triangling isn't always bad. Sometimes it's what we need. 3 legs is more stable than 2 sometimes. So, and it's being intentional about doing that. And so, right. Yeah, Alex says he wasn't interested in listening to their opinions. So it's a complicated thing and requires some discernment. So a couple things online from Tim Ransom. Our group discussed how listening is one of the most important emphases of covenant. Some of our past covenantal failures seem to have been failures to adequately listen. And from Nate again, that is a very important point. What we start here regarding right relations here at OUUC can then spread into our community. I'm working to implement these ideas for my staff. Bringing Lovingly Confronted is a wonderful concept. Other comments today? Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add one thing to what Alex had shared. I think, especially being relatively new here, I think it's important that we have this base of a covenant and behavioral covenant so that people coming in kind of know where things stand and they know how to participate. And they feel comfortable having a voice. And even being new, you know, you can visit here for the first time. And if there's something uncomfortable, I want people to feel like there's space to do that. And to the point about brave space, that just creates an opportunity for both parties, as you experience too. So I think it's important.
So our congregational covenant is one of the things that we cover in a new member class or a new UU class. And if we change the covenant, add a behavioral covenant, we'll share that as well as far as expectations. Anything else that must be shared today? I'm going to move to the pulpit now, text folks. So I want to thank you for the deep conversations and for the sharing that you did in your groups and in the larger group here. So the next steps then for this process, if you do have wording changes that you'd like to have considered, please email those to me. It's not that we're not accepting them, it's just not where we want to be in terms of the conversation right now. So we'll certainly receive that, and the writing team can look at it one more time, or the Healthy Congregations team will. The next thing that's really important is to share as widely as possible that this process is happening. I was delighted there were 37 of you in the room today and 10 people online. Tell your circles, this conversation is happening. And we want as many voices as possible to be in on the conversation about what this means. The Healthy Congregations team and I will talk about another forum. I'm thinking we might have one more in the spring to talk about this again, to have some small group conversation. And then the board decided that changes to the covenant should go before the congregation for a vote. And so we'll probably do one more forum, I'm thinking, just to kind of get the lay of the land, how are things looking, and then if we're feeling ready, we would bring it for a congregational vote. The annual meeting for the congregation is in June of next year, at the middle of June of next year, so that would be the next opportunity to have this in a congregational meeting. And if we're not feeling like we're ready, if we haven't had enough discussion, we'll have more. It's just a matter of when we feel like we're ready to adopt that. So I will ask before we close any questions that you have.
I can just speak loudly if that's okay. You know, the people online can hear me. Is this online? Is the new covenant about behavioral stuff, is it online so we can access it to look at it, not just on this 15 copies?
Yeah, it was in both the update and the Spark this week, so thank you for asking. So there's a link to it, yeah. Thank you, tech team. I'm making you work today, back and forth with the mics. Work harder than you already do. So any other questions about how to access things or what the next steps are? Okay. So our chalice has gone out, which means it's been about an hour and it must be time to go. I do want to offer these words from Franessa Taitang as we leave today. Like the flame of the chalice, may the flame in our hearts burn, remaining unextinguished. May it ignite our energies, our drive, our resolve to dream, to build, and to live into the world, that good which exists for now only in our imaginings. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.